Hello everybody and welcome back to my Fire Emblem 6 hard mode chapter guide. Today we're going to be doing part 25-ish, something like that, which is about chapter 21, the Sword of Seals. This is pretty darn close to the end of the game. We've just got out of whatever route split you were doing, whether it was Ilia or Sakai, so whichever one you chose, you are going to be having to do this chapter, and then there's, I think, four chapters, something along those lines, depending on whether you get all the divine weapons. This is also the chapter that leads us to our final Gaiden chapter. We do have to complete this within 30 turns, which can be kind of difficult, but usually isn't so bad, at least if you can kill wyverns. You got to make sure that you can kill wyverns for this chapter, because there's going to be a lot of that. So I know it's been quite some time since I uploaded a part. I'm hoping to get back to doing a little bit more regularly, much more regularly than it's been uploaded. We are extremely close to the end of the game. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to this chapter, so I'll try to make this video not too long. But the last handful of chapters are much more straightforward, so shouldn't be that bad. But yeah, this chapter in particular is huge. There are a ton of units. This is like, you know, Cog of Destiny from Fire Emblem 7, or Clash from Path of Radiance, those sorts of chapters, although this isn't just a giant plains where you fight a million enemies. But the point is there are an absolute ton of enemies, and most of them are going to be wyverns. As you can see, hopefully this isn't too distracting with the Roy and the other stuff on either side, but we are looking at a map of the chapter, so I'll be talking more about that in a minute, but as you can see, there are a decent amount of units to start with, but there's going to be a ton more spawning, so we'll get right into the chapter and how to approach it right now. Okay, so let's get right into the chapter. As you can see, I've drawn in a bunch of routes that you can potentially take on this, but before we get to that, I just want to say that this image is taken from FireemblemWod.com. I know I've referenced them a bunch throughout this series. I will leave a link to the chapter 21 page in the description. They're great for any kind of chapter data you're looking for. They even have strategies, although I've never really looked at those too closely, but they could be helpful to you. And it is really useful for this chapter because I'm not going to go in that much detail on what zones trigger what enemies. I'll reference them slightly, but on the website you can see exactly what they're summoning. We'll talk about reinforcement zones in a second, but you can pretty much be sure that whatever reinforcement zone you're coming into is just going to trigger a bunch of wyverns, because there just are a ton of wyverns, but some trigger paladins. So if you want to know more closely, you know, feel free to go to their website. It is extremely useful, and like I said, I will put a link in the description to that. But let's talk about the chapter. What's going on with these reinforcement zones? Basically, there are some units on the chapter when you start it, but most of the reinforcements are going to be coming when you enter these reinforcement zones. So that's like the yellow that you see on the right, or the green, the light green, down below where you start, those sorts of things. And those will trigger enemies to spawn. So for example, on the right, once you enter there, you can see the like blocks of yellow that are underneath it. Those will trigger those reinforcements, and they're usually, I think, about I think they're all 3 turns. Depending on, a few aren't, but for the most part, they're about 3 turns. So this is really going to depend on what route you want to take. And as you can see, I've laid out some different routes that you can take. Some I would recommend, some maybe not. Obviously, there's a bunch more. You could take some really bizarre routes if you want to hit all the reinforcements. But we do have to do this chapter within 30 turns to get to the Gaiden chapter with the Divine Weapon. So that might be a reason not to do every reinforcement spawn. Also, it's just tough. There's a lot of wyverns. The wyverns are really tough. I will say that the reinforcement wyverns, especially the non-wyvern lords, are a lot weaker than the ones that start on the chapter. So that might be a reason to fight more. But for the most part, I would say try to avoid as many of these zones as you can. So let's talk about the different routes that you can take. The one that I do a lot is the red one. So that goes to the right. It hits the reinforcement zone, the yellow one on the right. And again, that triggers those wyverns. Basically, if you do this, you have to deal with 3 turns of, it looks like about 8 wyverns coming at you. You really need a fairly strong unit to kind of be able to weather this storm, but you probably have characters like Milady or some kind of paladin, something like that at this stage. So this isn't too tough, and then you have a really clean shot at the boss, and you're really close as well, so you don't really have to worry about like the turns, for example. So that, I think, is a pretty decent route to take. It's also important to note right now that the wyverns that are kind of invisible, so you can see the bee wyverns, not the ones in the middle. If you're playing on hard mode, which this is for hard mode, those will be there, so I guess just be aware of that. This will also trigger the wyverns down close to the boss. So be aware of that. One of the things that, and we'll talk about this more when I actually get into the chapter, that I would highly recommend is bringing and using your wyverns of your own, for example, Mility, because one of the things that can be really annoying with this chapter, and again, we'll talk about this more when the chapter starts, is when wyverns sort of, they don't quite get to your team and they perch on these mountains, because it can be really hard to defend characters like Roy when you have like 4 wyverns that range your entire team. So that might be a reason not to go to the right, because it can be kind of annoying to deal with those. The second route is the green route. So this route, the objective here is to basically bypass all of the reinforcement zones except for the final one. You're going to have to get into the final reinforcement zone, as you can see down by where the boss is. This is just, you just have to go through that to defeat the boss. It's just a given. But the beauty of this is if you go over the mountain, you don't have to deal with either the green reinforcement spawn to the south of where you spawn, or the yellow one that I just talked about. Now, in order to do this, you basically have to transport your entire team, or at least the units that you want to use, with either the warp staff or flying with Falcon Knights or Wyverns, stuff of that nature. So this can be pretty tedious. I really wouldn't recommend doing this. If you really want to, and you have the tools to do it, and by that I mean you have enough flyers that you want to deploy, you absolutely can. But this is, I think, a pretty tedious way to go about the chapter. But it is kind of a cool way to do it. Also, I'll mention that there are a lot of different warp strategies that you can use. You can go into reinforcement spawns and then warp away units. If you have a unit with really high avoid, you can potentially have them take just a bunch of wyverns. There's some funny stuff you can do with that. I won't be talking about it too much. But the warp staff can be extremely useful here, as it can be useful in a lot of chapters. The next one is the blue route, which goes down and then all the way over, and then basically the same route. All of these could go to the left or to the right of where you can see the boss is. I usually go to the right because that zone triggers the reinforcements from the left, and so it's a little easier to go to the right. But you can do whatever you want. That's just kind of how I have them drawn up. This one also only goes through one reinforcement spawn, the green one, which triggers some reinforcements to the south. I believe this is the only one that triggers paladins. So this might be a better option. This is the one that I used to do. The beauty of this one is that paladins are not nearly as scary as wyverns, and you're not spawning nearly as much. So, okay, we're back. Sorry about that. The my emulator just keeps crashing. I don't know why. But yeah, so you can go through that, and again, that one might be easier. I have not done this one in quite some time, and it may very well be easier, because again, paladins are quite a bit easier to deal with than wyverns. I may try this actually for when we go through the chapter. But yeah, either route I think is okay. The big thing is, can you deal with the reinforcements from either yellow or green? And the beauty of both of those routes is that you only have to deal with one reinforcement spawn. The last route, which is the orange one, it goes through 2 reinforcement zones. Now, the black reinforcement zone, I believe, is only for 1 turn. It's the only one that's only for 1 turn. I believe. Yeah. So it's not so bad, and maybe that's an option that you want to take, although it does make you very close to the wyverns that are going to be spawning for the last reinforcement zone. So I wouldn't really recommend that one. But I suppose that is an option. There is one that I didn't put, which goes through all of the reinforcement zones, but I also would not recommend that. And then, as you can see, the final reinforcement zone can be really annoying because it triggers basically the purple blocks. So the one just to the left of the boss, way down in the south, that 4 wyverns, and then the one in the sort of the northwest up there. It triggers those. So that can be really annoying, especially if you're coming in from the red that I mentioned, because if your units are lagging behind a little bit, that can be really problematic. So that could be a reason to take a different route and deal with those wyverns with other units. In fact, in a recent Iron Man that I had, I lost a bunch of units because I kind of forgot this was going to happen, and I had a bunch of units that were just stranded back here. You also have, so that's it for the routes that you can take. Obviously, there potentially are other routes that you can take, but these are the major ones. I would recommend either the orange or the red, depending on what you want to do. Probably the orange, or sorry, the blue or the red. I would not recommend the orange. I think those are the easiest ones to take. Okay, so what else do we have going on in this chapter? We have Gale, who's going to spawn also when you enter the bosses. That's the light blue. So the purple around the boss is the wyverns that I talked about on the in the northwest and the south middle, I guess. But Gale is going to spawn with that light blue, so when you get close to the boss. Now, Gale, you can, I believe, you can talk to him with some people. You can't recruit him, of course, but in my experience, he's never actually attacked anyone. He just kind of wanders around and gets close to your units. So I wouldn't worry too much about Gale. I'm not honestly 100% sure how his AI works, because I always thought he did attack you, but then on my most recent playthrough, he just kind of wandered around. I would just be cautious with Gale. But yeah, he does spawn. He's pretty far behind though, so I wouldn't worry too much about him. The last thing to mention about the chapter before we get into it and we look at the boss and stuff is the secret shop. So as you can see, it's in Spanish, I believe, but that does say secret shop on the right there. This secret shop is probably the most famous in the game. I know we talked quite a bit about the angelic robes that you can buy from the previous one. Here you can buy boots, which is pretty rare that Fire Emblem allows you to just buy a mass amount of boots. You can have units with huge amounts of movement in the final chapters of this game. You can also buy all the other stat boosters, so like energy rings, secret book, those things, and promotion items here, along with bolting, purge, and eclipse, which I would not recommend buying. Boots cost the same as the angelic robes in the previous chapter. I would probably recommend choosing one or the other. If you have some money right now, and you have you still have the silver card and the ability to go into the secret shop, I think buying some boots isn't the worst idea. But the last handful of chapters aren't really about having movement. It's certainly helpful, as it always is. But yeah, I usually don't buy any boots here, to be honest. But you can absolutely buy as many boots as you have money remaining at this point. If you spent a lot of money on the robes, you can't, of course, buy as many boots. But this is the reason to not spend the money on the robes, because you can buy a shit ton of boots here, which is pretty funny. I think the angelic robes are useful, whereas the boots are funny. So it's kind of up to you as far as what you want to do there. But yeah, this is pretty much a baseline of what the chapter has to offer. I just wanted to start with the chapter map just because of the reinforcement zones and how important they are to the chapters. So next up, we'll switch to actual gameplay and we'll go over the boss and some of the other things in the actual chapter. Alright, and welcome to the battle preparations for the chapter. There's a few things that I want to talk about. Number one, are there any characters that we have to bring? We do need Melanie and Zeus alive for the end of this chapter for the guidance chapter, but you don't have to bring them. I will mention Gale one more time. I know I said that I don't really understand his AI when we were talking about the chapter before. I still don't really. I was looking it up, and it seems like if you kill Murdoch, or if you talk to... Murdoch is the boss, by the way. If you kill the boss, or if you talk to him with Melody, he'll stop attacking, but I'm pretty sure on my last Fire Emblem 6 playthrough, I hadn't done either of those things, and he just wandered up to my units and didn't do anything. But I believe I have been attacked by him before, so just to be cautious, I would recommend talking with Melody if you have the opportunity, or killing Murdoch for that matter. But killing Murdoch quickly can be kind of a problem, so just be aware that Gale can potentially attack you. And that is a pretty strong unit and some other wyverns that you won't have to deal with if you get to talk to them with Melody. So bringing Melody, obviously a good idea in general because she's extremely strong, but that can also be useful for sort of neutralizing Gale in that way. We don't really need anyone else specific. We are going to have to keep all of our divine weapons alive and around for the end of this chapter, so don't use all of their uses or lose a character with them with the one equipped, obviously. Also, bows and magic are going to be extremely useful for this chapter. As we can see, there are a lot of wyverns already on this chapter, and they are really strong, especially defensively, but the resistance is not so strong. So magic does a great job. Obviously, stuff like Air Caliber in particular does a great job, but any kind of magic will hit them really, really hard. And any kind of bow, because effective damage is really high in this game, is extremely useful as well. We had sort of a file going through Sakai and a file going through Ilya. I have chosen to use the Sakai one. As annoying as Sakai is, it does force you to train your Shin and potentially your Su. It also gives you access to Dion, who can be extremely useful here because he has pretty good stats. He doubles and can use really strong bows. Also, characters like Klain and a Green can be extremely useful at this stage as well, given that they also have pretty good stats, and again, bows have really good effective damage in this game. So any kind of bow unit, and again, any kind of magic unit, characters like Nime, even Cecilia, especially with her caliber, can do really well here. We are also going to be getting a really nice magic unit when we start the chapter, but yeah, so those are going to be my recommendations for units. I said before as well that Melody is extremely useful to bring as well, just because she can attack wyverns on mountains, and also she's amazing, so not much to be said there. But yeah, your bulkier units as well. But for the most part, as I said, just bring your stronger units. There is an armory and a vendor available right at the start here. They sell pretty good stuff, so if you need to stock up on anything, this is a really good opportunity to do so. This can be kind of a grind of a chapter, so make sure that you are properly outfitted and all that good stuff. But yeah, for the most part, I'm just going to be bringing our stronger units, and then we're going to be getting a character when we start, so I'll come back and we'll talk about him. Okay, just a few more things that I want to mention before we actually start getting into the chapter. Number one is that I mentioned that there's wyverns that spawn here, and there's wyverns that spawn down here that don't appear when you're just looking at the map, so the map does wind up being a little bit more full than you might expect. I believe the limit for units that can spawn on this chapter is 50, and as you can see, they start with 45. So you can potentially manipulate that when you get into zones to make it so that units don't spawn, but that's kind of a specific thing. I will also mention this is really important. There are no status staves or siege tomes. There is one siege tome actually, but there are no status staves on this entire chapter, which is pretty amazing. You don't have to worry about restore or anything like that. There are some of these sages and bishops and stuff kind of around the map, but none of them has status staves or siege tomes. There is one siege tome. It's this guy, which can be pretty annoying. He doesn't move, but of course he has 10 range and 24 magic bolting, so that's not nothing. It can be pretty annoying when you're ready to like fight Murdoch. You have to kind of get through these boltings, and potentially he can like double and kill Roy depending on how strong your Roy is. Roy is also going to be promoting after this chapter, which doesn't really matter. I mentioned that you really shouldn't be trading him or worrying about him too much, but just be aware that if you are trading him, you might want to get into 20 for the end of this. This is the boss, Murdoch. For some reason, he has a Knight's Crest if you still need a Knight's Crest at this point. But yeah, this dude, he's not super like difficult to deal with. He's only got 13 speed, so everyone doubles him, but 72 HP along with 28 defense and 19 res mean that it's going to take a bit to kill him. Obviously, there are ways, if you have like really strong magic or like an armor slayer on a strong rucker or something to really annihilate him. But just be aware that you may want to have a plan for him, whether it be that armor slayer or some kind of, four blaze or some kind of strong magic, just because we are going to want to kill him fairly quickly. Again, you do have to complete this chapter within 30 turns. Also, both these guys have horse slayers, which might not matter for you, but might be something to keep in mind if you wind up with paladins there. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try the route that I mentioned where we go down here and then across and then down here. I haven't done this one in a while. Again, usually I go over and then down, but I kind of want to try this one out and see how it feels. But yeah, again, you can do either one depending on what you like. And then as you can see by what units I brought, it's mostly our bulkier units, so our calves, and then a lot of archers. So Shin, of course, as I said, we got Dion, and then I think both a green and Klein can be really good. Klein's good because he can immediately use the silver bow, which is really good might, so he can deal a lot of damage. A green can't, but her stats are slightly better, so either way, they're both really useful. Finally, we have Yoder, or Yodel, it depends on the translation patch. But he's a level 20 bishop that we get on this chapter. He's really amazing. As you can see, his stats aren't stunning other than that resistance. He is pretty frail with 5 defense, but they're good enough, and his weapon ranks are really good. So he immediately has S in staves, which is awesome because he comes with the S rank staff, which is the Saint Staff. So the Saint Staff not only recovers all HP to everyone on the chapter, but it also restores status, which is really, really useful because it means if you're struggling for restore staffs at this point, you're going to have access to that. It also means if you get yourself into kind of a pickle with people being berserked or slept or things like that, because you can get into some awkward spots where, your restore user gets berserked or slept, and then someone else gets berserked, whatever. This can be really useful. There isn't a ton of that going forward, but on the Zephiel chapter in particular, it can be kind of annoying. Also, sometimes you just wind up with, like, Mility in a weird spot on one of the final chapters, so it's just useful to have access to, and it's nice that he can use it. We also get the S-rank Lance, which is really good. All divine weapons have effective damage against Manicheets in the late game, but also Wyverns, which we're going to be fighting a lot of. So, again, we don't want to be using all of the uses because then we can't go to the final part of the game, and we also want a decent amount of uses for the Manicheet chapter, which is the end game. But you can use them a decent amount here if need be. You can also hammer in them, so which you should have at this stage. Other than that, one of the other nice things about him is that he has that capped resistance, which seems kind of pointless, but it means that people status staffing him is really difficult. So he's also just a great user of the restore staff, whether you want to use the Saint Staff or not. And also 19 magic means that he can actually hit, you know, decently hard. Lightning obviously kind of sucks, but he can, yeah, he can hit decently hard on the wyverns on this chapter. So yeah, that's our new unit. Again, really useful. Would highly recommend deploying him for a few chapters in the future. So the last thing I'm going to do is we're just going to take a look at these this armory. As you can see, there are silver weapons. Unfortunately, silver weapons are not nearly as good as killer weapons. I mentioned that earlier. You really want to be buying killer weapons, but it's not that big a deal. You know, silver weapons still hit pretty hard. And then here we can buy a bunch of different tomes. Divine can be kind of nice to give. Yoder, although Divine really sucks in this game. As you can see, it has 3 more might than a lightning tome. Not very good, doesn't weigh very much, that's nice. And there's also Physic, which is an extremely useful thing to buy. No Restore here, so that's where the Saint Staff can be really useful. Because if you're struggling for Restores, you kind of get one just there. I don't know why I clicked on Nime, but... so yeah, so I'll be kind of skipping around from here on out. I'll probably show you what the reinforcements look like when we get down there. I'm also going to be doing some shopping because our weapons are kind of weak right now. But yeah. Okay, so really quick, I just want to go over the reinforcements. As I said, by going down here and getting in this reinforcement zone, you do trigger some paladins and some wyverns. The nice thing about the paladins is, as you can see, they are quite a bit weaker than like the wyvern lords, for example. And they're also quite a bit weaker than the wyvern riders. But some of the wyvern riders that the reinforcement wyvern riders can be a little bit weaker, although it looks like these ones are stronger. But that's the beauty of doing this, is because the paladins just aren't very strong. Although they do have a decent amount of health. And then as you can see, there's some wyverns that spawn from here. I had Millie go take care of them. And then the wyverns from down here. But yeah, the Silverlance almost capped or capped strength wyvern lords are no joke. So be really careful with this stuff as you do this. But again, I like this just because the reinforcement zones do include these sort of weaker paladins. Okay, 2 things to note really quick. Number 1, there are a shit ton of enemies on this chapter, so just be aware of this. This is why it's really important to bring units that can actually take hits, those sorts of things. Again, one of the nice things about doing this is that these paladins can't fly over the mountain, so you can kind of create choke points. And if you have stronger units, like, you know, we have a good Lance and Allen with their support and that sort of thing, you can usually choke off the units. The other thing is, as I said, these reinforcements do last for 3 turns. I believe we did just get our 3rd reinforcement spawn of the paladins and the wyverns, so it's not so bad. It may seem really insane for a little bit, but again, we're only going to have to be dealing with one of these reinforcement zones until we get to the boss, so it's not so bad. But a lot of units are going to show up, so just be aware of that. Okay, one more thing I want to mention really quick. I mentioned the Silverlance Wyvern Lords, and you should absolutely be terrified of the Silverlance Wyvern Lords. But most of these groups will come with, usually someone with a Steel Lance. Sometimes I think they come with 2 units with Steel Lances. Sometimes they come with someone with a Javelin, but they also usually come with someone with a Killer Lance. And while these Wyvern Riders are quite a bit weaker than the Wyvern Lords, 20 strength Killer Lance Wyvern Riders are still really tough, especially considering how good of hit the Killer Lances have. So just be aware of that. It's kind of difficult to go through this chapter unless your team is like extremely strong without ever risking anything, considering how much, you know, Killer Lance crits can potentially do. Obviously do your best to do that, but sometimes someone just might die to a Killer Lance, so just be aware of that. It can be really difficult to avoid that. Okay, so I know I said that that I wouldn't go into the black reinforcement zone and that you shouldn't, but I'm gonna kind of experiment with a new route here that I've never tried before, and that's going all the way to the south here. So these reinforcements, after you enter the black zone, which I believe starts around here, something like that, is only for 1 turn. So you only have to deal with these guys with 1 set of these guys. As you can see, we actually have no Killer Lances. That's kind of funny, which Lou should be able to do fairly easily. And then I think we should be able to skirt to the boss pretty easily. So I'm going to try this out. I think this might actually be the best route. But again, all 3 routes, whether you go down into the middle or around this way, I think can be usable. But I'm trying that route out here. The other thing I'll mention is that there is a nice crest in the house. Well, she put in the convoy. But it's kind of funny that you can get a nice crest from the house and you can steal one off the boss. I don't know who's still promoting like multiple Cavaliers or Knights at this stage. But those are available if you need them for some reason. But yep. Okay, so I'm going to try kind of a strategy that I've never tried before. If you're coming at it from this angle, I believe it's around here that you have to sit. One of the annoying parts is that this bolting guy won't be able to range you, whether you're over here or whether you're coming from up here, until you get within the range. So it's kind of annoying because units can't really move up because they could potentially be killed by the bolting. But you can't really leave them back because either reinforcements are going to spawn from up here or from down here. So I think what I'm going to do is have Gonzalez go on these peaks because he gets a ton of avoid, and he should be able to take the wyverns without too much issue, I think. You can do a similar thing back here. You could also do this with just about anyone. I mean, you could rescue drop somebody onto the peaks, like Lou or something. He would probably be pretty immortal. Or just kind of some paladins, whatever you want to do. But yeah, this guy in particular can be really annoying. If you have like Silence or Berserk or something, this can be a good opportunity for that. Also, he does get way down a little bit, so I believe he has 12 speed after bolting, which means even my really weak Roy won't get doubled, so we should be okay, and obviously he has 58 HP. But yeah, at this stage, we're going to want to kill these Manikeets. I believe the Manikeets on this chapter do move. Just be aware that you do have to have a plan for these. Divine Weapons are effective, and you can also hit them really hard with any kind of magic, so they're not too tough to kill, but just be aware of that. So yeah, at this stage, we're just going to want to bum rush the boss. I'll show you the reinforcements once they start spawning. But yeah, I believe it's turn 12. Yeah, you have to do this within 30 turns. So as you can see, the turn limit isn't too bad, unless your team is really weak and you're really struggling to kill units. Okay, so remember when I said that I didn't really understand Gale's AI? Yeah, I still don't really understand it. So as you can see, again, when I looked this up, people were talking about how he fights, but they all surrounded Merlinus and are just kind of like hanging out chilling, which is cool. Like, I have no problem with that. But I don't really understand it. I guess a good strategy. So I had Merlinus back here because I was doing the shopping, and obviously Merlinus' death doesn't matter. So I figured he could at least aggro them even if they murdered him. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe they'll attack him next turn, but I don't think so. So this is a pretty good strategy. Just have Merlinus back here and do your shopping, and then take on the reinforcements. But yeah, I don't know why Gale isn't killing him. I really don't understand. And then, as I said, there's reinforcements from here, so there's a couple of units we're going to have to deal with. If they catch up to us, which they probably will at some point. And then, yeah, my Gonzalez plan seems to be working out pretty well. As you can see, the hit rates here are really bad. Again, you can absolutely rescue drop anybody onto these mountains, and this peak giving 40 avoid is usually enough to not take too much from these guys. This guy didn't bolting. I think we're just out of range. But yeah, at this point, the rest of the chapter is going to be pretty simple. We're just going to try to rush into here as quickly as we can and kill Murdoch. So. Okay, I will say, and I've kind of just been tinkering around with this strategy, so it wasn't really something I had coming into this, but one of the downsides of this strategy, and potentially doesn't have to be a downside, because I believe these final reinforcement spawns are 3 turns as well, so I think potentially the best strategy is to do what I did with Gonzalez, or again, Lou, whoever, rescue drop, and then wait out the 3 turns, because the problem is if you rush down here like I'm doing, the wyverns are just going to be in range of your units, which is fine. Like, Lou in particular just killed all the wyverns, so it is what it is. If you want to be really careful, I think waiting out the 3 turns, and then having somebody up here to wait out the 3 turns on these reinforcements is probably the best strategy. Again, this is like, this route in particular is like a completely new strategy. I've never done this before, so, but I do think it's probably the best route, now that I think about it. I like it quite a bit. It's really safe, which I like. But yeah, if you do what I did here, you are just going to have to take out the enemies. It's not that big a deal. We were able to dance for shit and kill the bolting guy pretty quickly. And you couldn't kill Roy. And then take out the wyverns. So yeah. Seems like one wyvern is going to Merlinus up here, but yeah, the Seal Lance won't actually be able to do anything. I wonder if actually putting Merlinus potentially not in range of the people that start, because obviously they'll just kill him, but like up here maybe would aggro more. I'm not really sure. There's a lot of things that you can do to explore this. Again, the warp staff also changes this quite a bit. You can do a lot of fun stuff with that. So I don't know. I guess just experiment. But I do like this route quite a bit, the one that I took. Just to go over it one more time, it's you spawn up here, going down here, triggering the reinforcement spawns, then going down here, triggering the 1-turn reinforcement spawns, and then around here, putting somebody here to deal with the wyverns. You're going to also, especially if you wait it out, potentially put somebody maybe on this mountain, like Lou or something, to bait out these wyverns, and then go kill the boss. I think that's probably the best approach to the chapter that I can think of. Okay, so I'll talk about killing the boss just really quick. As you can see, our damage is not particularly good. We also don't have Weapon Triangle on Milady here. But yeah, 7 damage. Even with this, we only deal 9. With my Lou, I think I was dealing something like 10. I believe he has capped magic, or pretty close. Obviously, you can have stronger. You can have like 4 Blaze or something, as I mentioned. But the Armor Slayer is really going to be your best bet. The ability to have Weapon Triangle in conjunction. Also, by the way, this music, absolutely amazing. I don't think it's very loud, but... Oh, also, I guess Murdoch has a specific thing with Milady. I didn't even know that. But yeah, the Armor Slayer in particular is extremely useful at killing Murdoch. Again, in this situation, you know, it's only turn like 15 or something, but potentially if you need to kill him really quickly, or you can't really deal with these wyverns in the back, it can be really important to kill kill really quickly, and the Armor Sawyer is going to be your best bet for that. So we should be able to kill him next turn. I don't think there's a lot left to this chapter. For the most part, I'm just going to zone out these wyverns that are coming from the back and probably try to kill him with an archer here. But yep, not much left to talk about. Okay, so we just killed Murdoch. I will say that, again, it is turn 17 at the moment, so the reinforcement spawn should be done. And if you did want the boots, which I'm not going to bother with the boots, I bought some other some physics and stuff anyways. But if you do want to do stuff with the boots, it will not get us into any kind of reinforcement spawns to send somebody up here at this stage. So usually I try to finish this chapter really quickly, but you can absolutely wait out the reinforcement spawns. I believe nobody here has range either, so Merlinus is actually going to do a great job of keeping everybody around. I really like this Merlinus strat. I will also apologize because I know that my strats, especially throughout this video, have been kind of like wishy-washy as far as like what I've said is the best thing to do. The truth is there's a lot of different ways to approach this chapter, and honestly, as I said, I've never done this strat in particular, and I really like it. I honestly think this is the strat that I'm probably using going forward. The strategy that I used to use was, again, going around here, fighting these units, and then going down here. But this strategy is really annoying because when you get in range, the reinforcements that spawn from this mountain are pretty tedious to deal with. Again, I don't think this route is like that bad. If you can deal with these reinforcements, it's about the same as the one that I just showed. So I think both routes are good. Again, I think you can go with whatever route you want to. I think there can be a lot of successful routes on this chapter. But yeah, that's about it for chapter 21. This is one of my favorite chapters in the game. I like this one quite a bit. I think it's a lot of fun. Also, you get this cutscene, which is unskippable if you did it correctly, because we're going to be going to the Gaiden chapter. But yeah, so as always, I hope everyone enjoyed. If you have anything to add, I know I don't mention this a lot, but if you have anything to add, if you think there's anything else important to the chapter, anything I missed, anything I said wrong, if you understand how Gale's AI works, please feel free to put it down in the comments. And then, as I said, I know this one has been pretty disjointed from the last one. It's been a while since I've done one, but the last couple chapters should be pretty simple to make videos for, so should be getting those out a lot quicker than the last one. So, as always, thanks everybody for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you next time.